Welcome to each of you to our fourth annual Advocis Regulatory Affairs Symposium. This year's edition is entitled Turning Point, Seizing and Shaping Our Future Insurance, Pension, and Securities. The first question of the day is, I think, why did we choose the term turning point for this year's symposium? Well, the answer lies in today's date. As most of us will recall from history class, today, October 29th, is the anniversary of the infamous Black Tuesday, or October 29th, 1929, the start of the stock market crash which launched the Great Depression. It was 83 years ago today that the Dow Jones lost 12% of its value, $14 billion at the time. The panic in U.S. markets resulted in a record volume of stocks being traded that day, a record which stood for 40 years. Here in Canada, as in the United States, the catastrophe hit anyone who had invested in the markets. On that day, Canadian blue chip stocks lost over $5 billion, a drop in value which exceeds anything before or since in Canadian equity markets. Even our political elites and business elites were not immune. R.B. Bennett, the man who would become Prime Minister a year later, lost a small fortune. Another future Prime Minister, Louis Saint Laurent, saw his portfolio wiped out, and he was still paying off his margin debt during World War II. Of course, politicians in those days did not enjoy the lucrative pensions they do today, and we will circle back to that issue later in the day. I would note parenthetically that one of the major issues in the market leading up to the crash was what has come to be known as excessive leveraging, a topic on which regulators are still at work and which advisors still deal with in the field. The crash itself led to massive levels of unemployment and social unrest, coupled with crippling amounts of national debt, themes which we see being played out in Europe and to a lesser extent here at home. So it's fair to say, 83 years ago today, our predecessors faced a turning point. For many economists and for historians, the October 29th market crash and the ensuing Great Depression marked the major turning point in the development of the modern economy. Indeed, many observers at the time feared that the capitalist economy was finished. Thankfully, that proved not to be the case. Today, I submit to you, we once again face a turning point, perhaps not as overtly dramatic as the one which appeared on Black Tuesday all those years ago, but one every bit as significant for advisors and potentially as far-reaching in its consequences for the public at large. And this brings us to the idea behind this year's symposium, the turning point we must confront today. Here at home, we face at best modest economic growth. And while the federal government is largely on track to hit its fiscal targets, concerns about global developments, from the debt crisis in Europe to uncertainty about U.S. fiscal policy, pose very real threats to an already slow global economic recovery. Just days ago, the International Monetary Fund downgraded its forecast for global growth next year and expressed concerns about Canada's housing markets and anticipated growth rates. So the evidence is there. Canada and a host of other nations certainly face a turning point at the macroeconomic level. But I would go much further than that. I would say that the turning point we face today goes much deeper than the national level where fiscal and monetary policy play out. I would say that today's turning point also confronts us on a more immediate and intense and everyday level and represents a major challenge to how we do business. I would say that advisors, and by extension, all Canadians who want to seek financial advice are currently facing a turning point. Perhaps the foremost sign of this turning point lies in the fact that the likelihood of ordinary Canadians being able to access affordable, proficient, and professional financial advice into the future is now being called into question. Now, there are several reasons for this. In part, there is a risk of us importing into Canada foreign solutions for our Canadian problems, such as placing advisors under a statutory fiduciary duty when we already have a time-tested and workable fiduciary duty at common law. And in part, there is the risk of our own made-in-Canada solutions doing either too much or too little when it comes to addressing problems of access to suitable financial products and affordable professional financial advice. And finally, we face problems related to the retirement savings of individual Canadians, their access to suitable investments and insurance products and services, the affordability of our government pensions and old age security programs, and the future success of our private pension plans. All these challenges will be addressed by our panelists and speakers today. These challenges are collectively the turning point advisors and their clients face. As a turning point, it is not as dramatic as the panic collapse in the equities of Black Tuesday, but it is every bit as problematic for the future financial health of Canadians. So when confronted with this turning point, what can advisors do? I would suggest that advisors, individually and as a profession, make known to their clients, to the public at large, and to industry and regulatory stakeholders the fact that the advice they provide is valuable and necessary. Now, everyone in this room is aware that financial advisors and financial institutions they represent frequently proclaim the benefits of having a financial advisor. The received wisdom is that advice contributes to the client in a myriad of ways, including improved savings and investment behaviors, better selection of financial products, enhanced tax treatment of savings, optimization of the asset mix, and less tangibly, but no less crucially, increased client confidence and financial peace of mind. But the question has always been asked by industry critics, without measurable, quantifiable research, can we honestly say that financial advice is worth the cost? Well, at long last, we do have that research. And the answer to that question is a resounding yes. New independent research recently released by Professor Claude Mamaquette and Nathalie Viano-Briot of the Montreal-based Centre for Inter-University Research and Analysis on Organizations, or CIRANO as it's popularly known, offers very strong social scientific evidence of the link between the presence of financial advice and the accumulation of financial wealth. It is fair to say that the paper, which has the unassuming title of Econometric Models on the Value of Advice of a Financial Advisor, has finally closed the book on the issue of whether middle-class Canadians benefit from advisors. It is Canada's largest and most data-rich survey to date on the topic of financial advice, the value of financial advice. The study is based on data from over 18,000 households compiled in 2010 and 2011. The sample size enabled Mamaquette and Viano-Briot to employ sophisticated econometric techniques to factor out nearly 50 socioeconomic, demographic, and attitudinal variables. After accounting for these variables, the results conclusively demonstrate that having a financial advisor contributes positively and significantly to the accumulation of financial wealth. Specifically, the study finds that 1. Advice has a positive and significant impact on a client's financial assets. 2. Advice positively impacts a client's retirement readiness. And 3. Advice positively impacts levels of client trust, satisfaction and confidence in their financial advisors, an outcome which is in itself an indicator of the value of advice. And finally, advice contributes significantly to the rate at which households save. The fact is, the longer the advisory relationship, the greater the impact on wealth. Moreover, all evidence points to improved savings behavior as the key to the success that advised households enjoy in accumulating assets relative to non-advised households, and of the important role of the financial advisor in encouraging this behavior. While we all know this from our own experiences, and some of us here today have known it for decades, it's good to have the truth borne out by the CIRANO study in such a careful and inarguably objective fashion. From seeing the vindication of our industry's claim that our advice is valuable, is worth the cost, we can move to the issue of how advisors and other industry actors can confront the turning point we face today. All of this brings me to today's agenda. We see the turning point which awaits us. We know our services are valuable, and we know the ability of Canadians to access them needs to be preserved. But how do we use our expertise to address the problems presented to us? This is why Advocis makes representations to governments and regulators on a wide range of subjects, including how to improve the regulation of securities and insurance and promote greater efficiencies in the pension and retirement systems. Serrano's research reinforces the value of advice and the importance of public policies and regulation that don't hinder our members' ability to provide that advice. Today's symposium is a key part of this ongoing process of consultation, comment, and review undertaken between industrial, consumer advocacy, advisory, and regulatory stakeholders. Moving from the value of advice to financial products, we will hear our Securities panel, which promises to provide us with varying regulatory and practice perspectives in a discussion about retail investing in our domestic service securities market. Our Securities panel is composed of a diverse group of industry thought leaders. Mutual funds compliance expert Karen McInnes, Vice President Compliance at the Mutual Fund Dealers Association of Canada. The Senior Vice President of Enforcement, Member Policy and Registration at the Investment Industry Regulatory Organization of Canada, Paul Riccardi, who oversees securities dealers in 12 different markets. Bill Rice, the very busy Chair and CEO of the Alberta Securities Commission and current Chair of the Canadian Securities Commission. And Ed Waitzer, a leading light in the quest for a national securities regulator and a partner at the law firm of Stikeman Elliott. Their discussion will be moderated by Dean Owen, Chair of the National Board of Advocis. Next, we will hear from Michael Lee Chin, Chairman of Portland Holdings. Michael will speak about the process of democratizing access to private equity funds in order to ensure that Canadian retail investors can begin to benefit from the same investment opportunities as institutional actors like the Ontario Teachers' Pension Plan Fund and very high net worth individuals. We'll finish the morning with a discussion of what the future holds for pensions. Our pension session brings together consumer advocates and pension and retirement experts from industry and government to help us chart the appropriate path forward. Defined benefit plans are rapidly disappearing from our retirement planning landscape. Too many Canadians do not have adequate private pension savings. And given the continual reduction in the levels of retirement funding provided by employers, where can average Canadians look for answers? We can expect to get at least some of those answers from the experts on our pension panel, which is composed of Susan Eng, Vice President Advocacy at the Canadian Association of Retired Persons, better known as CARP, the well-known pensions expert Malcolm Hamilton, a longtime partner at Mercer's, and Bill Tufts, consumer advocate and the founder of Fair Pensions for All. The moderator is one of Canada's leading financial writers, John Chevreau, editor of Money Sense magazine. Now, over lunch, we'll hear from Kevin Cowan, president of TSX Markets and group head of equities for the TMX Group, about the merger of Maple and the TSX and what lies ahead for exchange-based investing and trading in Canada. After lunch, Rick Annert, the president and CEO of Manulife Securities, will speak in more detail than I have here about the value of financial advice. And finally, we will hear from our insurance panel, which will discuss how insurance companies can move forward with improved product access and affordability to meet the increasingly diversified needs of consumers. This panel will offer you the regulatory perspective from Joanne Abram, CEO of the Alberta Insurance Council, the industry point of view from Ann Butler, Senior Vice President, General Counsel, and Corporate Secretary at Empire Life, and the advisor's position from Kevin Wark, President of the Conference of Advanced Life Underwriting, CALU. Moderator for this panel will be Chris Burchard, Chair of the Advocates Committee on Legal and regulatory issues. And after the insurance panel, Harry Lockhart, the Vice Chair of the Board, will wrap things up for us. So before we begin hearing from our speakers, I would also like to acknowledge and thank Advocis staff, in particular the Regulatory Affairs Group, which has been instrumental in establishing and developing this year's symposium and in expanding our relationships with industry regulators as we navigate past this critical turning point for financial advisors. I would also like to thank our sponsors, very importantly, our gold sponsors, Sun Life and Manulife, our silver sponsor, Canada Life, and our bronze sponsors, CDIC, Empire Life, and Primerica. So please join me in thanking these sponsors for helping to make this fourth annual Regulatory Affairs Symposium a reality.